Hi everyone, hello and welcome to this LinkedIn Live. Today I'm really delighted and honoured to be joined by the wonderful Dr. Victoria Valesa, and it's going to be a really good discussion, open, honest, transparent, quite bold and perhaps a little bit, tiny bit controversial about performance management and how to make it neuro-inclusive for neurodivergent employees and team members. My name's Kate Asiche, and I call myself a neuro inclusion navigator. Basically, all that means is I support managers to understand neurodivergence, how it presents in a workplace setting. I coach them and I train them. I have an online training program and I do one-to-one coaching to support them, because little do we know how many neurodivergent people are actually in the workplace. Many are not disclosed. Many don't even know they're neurodivergent. So I love helping people to peel away the layers of the onion to understand more about what's presenting in their team. I'll hand over to Dr. Victoria to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. Dr. Victoria Verleza. I use pronouns she and her. I'm here in the US and I am so thankful to be here with you today. If you've seen me on LinkedIn, you know I talk about a lot of things all of the time. One of my favorite conversations is systems and how people are operating within systems, how systems are perpetuated by us. I don't even know how to define myself, but my end goal in my life's work and passion is to take away and remove barriers and be a liberatory thinker and working consistently and constantly towards how are we eradicating systems that maybe we didn't create but are in our way in some cases for those of us who are historically suppressed or minoritized. So I am thrilled to be here to talk about something I really love, which is performance management, but how to make it inclusive for neurodivergent folks, because I am the victim of not neuro-inclusive performance management. So I was thrilled when Kate asked. So thanks y'all for being here, and thanks, Kate. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. And it is all about processes. I'm glad you said that, because often people think about performance management as being an isolated action or an isolated activity, but it's all about processes and the way that organizations, institutions are run, and the processes they employ are not necessarily helpful for those people who have to work within them. You're so right about that. And when we think about performance management, one of the things that always strikes me is this one time thing. It's a once a year, it's frantic, it's stressful, it's not enjoyable. People are fearful of it because of all the negative, things that we've seen around performance management over the years. How many of us, those of you who are watching, Victoria too, how many of us have experienced a really bad performance management interview or session with a manager who just didn't know how to do things properly or fairly? And this really resonates with so many people. I know you've posted a lot about it on LinkedIn, and you always get a fantastic response. So clearly, it's not a one-off, is it? One-off experience.
Nope. I think one of the hardest things, and we chatted a little bit about this, and when I did start, so just to give folks context, I was not having any kind of reach, and then all of a sudden I had a really big reach, and now we all know LinkedIn's doing what LinkedIn does, and things are changing, and that's okay. However, the response to stuff around feedback, the feedback that people are receiving, and the inequitable or inaccurate feedback is, I'm not going to call it mind-blowing because we know it happens, but I don't think people feel empowered enough to talk about their experience. So I've gotten feedback before, not in a performance review or appraisal, like just ongoing feedback that I talk too much in whatever messaging app. And what does that mean? What do you want me to do with this piece of information? And the response was, well, I'm just telling you because other people said it. Okay, so now you have my neurodivergent brain spiraling because I don't know what's right, what's not right. How does this impact my job? The issue was not that I was talking too much. The issue was they didn't know how to supervise someone like me, someone who was more advanced than others, was in a different area. And for me, it's not individual problem. It's the system, it's the policy, it's the manager, typically, generally, that doesn't know how to supervise someone who is neurodivergent or who does have a different way of thinking or learning. It doesn't even have to be under the umbrella. Like, rather than telling someone you shouldn't do this, why don't we look at what they're doing as a response to whatever system or policy or practice is out there? Because maybe there's a hole, maybe there's a gap, maybe they could be doing something else, but they don't know what to do. So for me, and for a lot of my community, I don't like the word followers, for the community of Cultivated, the feedback piece, the receiving personality-based feedback on tone or how people present in meetings really resonated. I posted yesterday that one post had close to 300,000
Oh,
impressions.
I saw that. It's amazing.
It's wild. And the stories that are being told in the comments just validate and scream, we need to be doing better across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. And I really sort of noted what you were saying there about this reluctance to share, and it's all about the
Mm,
mystery and the sort of smoke and mirrors around performance management. Almost feels like something which is hidden and which people
mm,
pretend doesn't happen or doesn't matter, because it has
mm,
such a huge impact on how you're received in a working environment. So we all know that performance management by default isn't really fair, and not many people will acknowledge this, but there's only so many people who can be high performers. There's only
right.
so many people who can be at a certain level. And so therefore, by default, people will always get marked down, which is, to me has always sort of struck me and made me think, gosh, it's really unfair, because no matter what you do, sometimes in a working environment, no matter how hard you work, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get a higher rating. And
Mm-hmm.
then on top of that, if you're neurodivergent, you present in a certain way, you talk in a certain way, you move in a certain way, your tone of voice is at a certain level. And you mentioned that, and it's so pivotal, that element of it, that presentation, that impression management that has such
Mm,
a huge impact, yeah, on someone's experience. And managers, perhaps even sometimes they could be neurodivergent themselves,
right.
but still not understand, because it's a massive spectrum. One person who's neurodivergent doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get on with the next
Right.
person who's neurodivergent or understand them. But
Absolutely.
tone of voice in particular, and pitch is really key when it comes to autism. And if you are in a performance management setting or scenario and someone's commenting on your pitch, that's really hard, because I have conversations with autistic people all the time, and my children are autistic. And some people will often say, I don't know I'm speaking loud, until people tell, I don't know what that means. What does that mean that
What
I'm
does that
talking
mean?
loud? And then I
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
think, yeah, what does that mean? What do I mean by that?
Right. Right.
It's crazy.
That's so, I laugh because, like, I am told all the time I have two volumes, one and then up. And I feel bad because my partner will say, like, why are you yelling? I don't mean to
Yeah,
be yelling. Like,
yeah,
I don't have a good recognition of that. And when you just said about the tone of voice, the pitch, etc., I once got feedback on a video. I needed to record myself giving a lecture. Now, I will tell you, I've been doing workshops, lectures for 20 years, and this is not new to me. That content wasn't new to me. It wasn't a new thing. The feedback I got was I was monotone and boring. Yeah, because I'm presenting to no one. Like, there's no energy there. So it was consistently, how do I perform, not my neurodivergence or not my baseline, so you don't give me negative feedback? Because when I challenge your feedback, people like to say you don't have a growth mindset or you're not being open to the feedback, but you're giving me feedback from your lens, not recognizing my perspective, my way of thinking. So it's this disconnect of, for me, with performance management specifically, or feedback, or any of these areas, what was done traditionally and how work has evolved, how people have come into the workplace. We know we've always been here. We know that autistic people have always been in the workplace. ADHDers have always existed. It's a matter of, do we mask, do we perform, or are we just being ourselves? And the organization, the leader, the supervisor, the teammate accepting that or not. And I think forcing, as you just were talking about, around not forcing, but making note of like voice noise. Yes, that makes sense. If I am speaking to a volume that a lot of people can hear me and that's not appropriate in this moment, I
Mm.
should know that. I'm not
Right,
going to think about it. Like if I'm saying
right.
something to my partner and I'm out in the world and she's like, "You're yelling right now." Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. And then like I try to
Yeah,
bring it back down. There's time and place for all the
right.
things. Sorry, that was a tangent, but
No, 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 not tangent at all. Not tangent. It all fits into the conversation we're having because you're right there. As what struck me just now, as you said, there's a time and place for everything. And a working environment is often so formalized, and people are considered, it's considered appropriate for people to shrink, to
mm,
play themselves, make themselves smaller somehow, particularly women. They're
yes,
always encouraged to, pipe down, calm down, you know, get a grip. I think I've heard that said quite a lot to women in Parliament, which is our UK system
yeah,
for political discussion. And those of you who are watching live, feel free to drop your questions or comments into the comment section so that we can address them. I know that Victoria has an immense amount of experience, knowledge, to share. So feel free to, use this opportunity, and one of the things that you mentioned just now, really sort of made me think about the times that I've had feedback in performance reviews where people have just focused on what you would perceive to be the negatives or the challenges. And I wonder, how much of a role, I mean, it does play a role because it's to do with mindset. If you're a manager and your mindset is that work is should be like this. People who work in the environment should act like this. People should dress like this. People should talk like this. If you come across someone who doesn't present in that way, you make a bigger deal of it than it actually is. So, one thing that struck me as you were saying, there's a time and a place for everything. But what if someone is
mm,
unable to change themselves? What if someone is causing someone too much strain and effort to lower their voice or change their pitch in order to fit in? What happens then?
yeah. I pause because it's that was me. So I was in a place that I was being asked to change, to dim, to shrink, to not be who I am, and I ended up leaving. I stuck it out for a year, and I told myself if I didn't get a promotion, which I knew I deserved based on time, experience, my client feedback, etc., that I would leave. Luckily, I had another job lined up, and that's not everybody's reality, especially with the world the way that it is right now in the working world. Not everybody can just say they're going to leave. So one thing that I have done when I was not able to just up and leave is try to figure out, how do I navigate my own identity? Can I identify someone who can be an accomplice and practice allyship when I'm not in the room? So I would call this person like a translator. I would identify one person in other working places. I struggle a lot with like written questions or people posting things in different like Slack or Teams or whatever. Even in email, I'm not always sure how I'm supposed to feel based on what I'm reading. And I know a lot of people assign feelings and thoughts to what they're reading. So I identified a person who I could then message and say, I'm not sure what this means or what the subtext is here. I know there is some, but I don't know what it is. So I would find somebody to almost help me navigate. And I would talk openly with my manager or my supervisor about the fact that I am neurodivergent. Here's what that
Yeah,
means, here how it shows up. And this is what I need from you. And some of them were really good at, before giving feedback, are you in a place where you can receive this right now? So it was simple shifts. And what I encourage folks to do is to use like working with me documents so teams know how to best work together. I encourage people to bring in folks like us to talk about neuroinclusion, the history of ableism, what is inclusive communication, what is equitable communication, because the other thing that you mentioned specifically around women, we even need to break it down further to
Yes.
Black, Indigenous, and other non-Black people of color, specifically women, and the feedback that they get versus what white women get. It's not about advancing, it's about your personality or your characteristics. And I think that a lot of folks are unaware of how to mitigate their own biases or how those biases are showing up. You're putting somebody on a PIP, a performance improvement plan. That's what we call it here in the US. The end goal for most places is to get that person out.
Yeah.
Well, that shouldn't be your first reaction. If you're working with a manager and they're giving you a PIP, find somebody who can coach you and talk to you about what that actually means if you're neurodivergent. And workplaces, if that's your first line of defense, y'all need some coaching. Like, you need to shift your way of working with someone and not making the assumption that they missed a deadline because they don't care. Maybe they missed a
Right.
deadline because their time perception is off, or maybe there's
Right.
something going on externally. The other part of this that you said, like, what do you do if you can't alter or change or flex? I very much believe managers, employers, leaders need to figure out how to cultivate psychological safety so that a neurodivergent or even a non-neurodivergent person can say, this is what I have going on, without fear of it being used against them. And I think one of the things workplaces don't know how to do is balance the bringing your full self to work and recognizing that it's not about excuses, it's context for how you're producing, I guess.
Yeah, that I love that. I love absolutely love that idea of a translator. I think that's amazing and actually beneficial for a lot of people, not just neurodivergent people. Although I don't like going down that road, when people say, well, actually everyone can benefit because
Yeah,
that has its challenges, that kind of narrative.
absolutely.
But I take your point, is totally relevant for a lot of people. I remember, and maybe I did this intuitively without realizing
Mm,
that I was doing it, but I would often get a second pair of eyes on my email responses,
yep.
particularly if it was a contentious email that I'd received. And we all know the whole advice given about waiting a couple of few hours before responding, drafting your response and leaving it in your draft folder, then going back maybe even the next day and then rereading and checking whether it's still is a balanced and fair response to what you've
Mm,
received. Because as you said, people, they layer on their own views, their own prejudices, their own feelings, their own
yeah.
experiences onto that email, when in fact, the person may not have intended it to be read in that way. So I love the idea of our translators, extremely valuable, immensely valuable. And what the hell with the PIP, what we call it a PIP too, performance
Abolish it.
improvement. Yeah, what the hell with that? I mean, the amount of, when I look back, I feel really sad actually. I've got 25 years career
Mm,
experience in corporate communications. And some of the times I've led teams and some of the times I've seen employees put on PIPs, I'd say every single person was very possibly neurodivergent.
yep.
And I had absolutely no idea that that was the
Mm,
case.
mm,
Really, really sad statistic. And we don't even know, do we, the numbers of employees who are neurodivergent who are
right,
being put on PIPs.
right. Well, and I think part of that is the ableism and the internalized ableism. So if you look at and I call it traditional because I don't really know what else to call it, but like the way work has evolved and what it used to look like and what it looks like now. The piece that I keep thinking about is people who are supervising were brought up in a particular kind of way. And when we think about disability, and I including neurodivergence under that umbrella, we think of it in a particular type of way. So we're constantly battling, in my opinion, at work, through reviews, through emails, through meetings, all of these things, the traditional ableist views of what work should look like. If you can't show up to work your 40 hours a week, you are not producing the way we want you to produce, so you can't be here, without recognizing the barriers of that. And I typically talk about, even just, I have endometriosis that can debilitate me for days. And I was working, this was like 10 years ago, and I would lose 2 to 3 working days a month because I was out sick. But that meant I was having a flare up, which meant my pants didn't fit. I was fainting. I mean, there were so many pieces of it. But without a mindful, or at least an anti bias, anti ableist supervisor, I wasn't able to even have that conversation. It was just, I'm sick. And so I think for so many folks in the working world with neurodivergencies that aren't necessarily sharing it, we're left to just figure it out, because supervisors have their own views of non-disabled privilege that they don't even necessarily have names for. And one
Yeah,
of those things is working 8 hours a day with no problem.
yeah. Exactly, coming in at the same time, leaving at the same time, being able to be present in meetings and fully on
Yeah,
all the time, not needing downtime, not needing recovery time. I mean, I
absolutely.
know, looking back, some of the times I've had to go into the toilet, I've spent a long time in public loos or in
Mm,
organization, corporate loos, toilet facilities, just because I felt the need to do that after I'd been in a setting, a very socially busy setting, lots of social interaction, lots of talking, lots of conversation, lots of debate and disagreement. Apologies if you just heard that. There's a police car just driving down the road at breakneck speed. Um, and yeah, just needing that downtime, that quiet 10 minutes afterwards on my own. For a long time, I thought that was just me. I thought, oh God, that's really odd. Why do you need to do that? And it's only now I'm looking back and thinking, yeah, that's a natural response
mm,
for a neurodivergent person, to having been in that intense situation of having lots of conversation, lots of eye contact, lots of, back and forth. Conversations
mhm.
are extremely tiring for neurodivergent people. And you're right, it's all about managers having that ability to be able to understand what's in front of them. I preach about it so much
Yeah,
because it's so easy to jump to negative conclusions. This person is constantly late. Why is that? Oh, it's because they can't be bothered to get up on time. They're slow.
right.
They're lazy. No, it's because commute is tough, first thing in the morning. It's really overwhelming for someone who has sensory sensitivities. They don't
Yes,
want to travel at peak time, and what's the problem with them coming in an hour later if it helps them to come in regulated and
yes,
calm
yep,
and less anxious, or and leave a bit later. It's all about very small, interventions and allowances that support neurodivergent, employees to do their best work. It's all about enabling them and harnessing them to demonstrate what they're made of. And
mm,
what you said earlier about that high performance and not being able to neurotypical, non-neurodivergent people not understanding that particular type of performance. Do you
right.
have any thoughts on, the performance of neurodivergent people versus a typical performance?
I love this question because I think about it a lot, and I'm going to use myself as the example because I don't like other people to have to ever think about themselves, but me, example. So can I can do work very quickly. I have a lot of knowledge up here. My friends joke that I'm a walking librarian. I just know things. Like, I can talk about studies, I can talk about, but whatever. That is not my peers' real life. That is not my non neurodivergent friends' existence. They're good in other things, but those are not their ways. And one of the things that I have noticed is I can do things way faster than a lot of people. So I myself have had to pull back, because what I end up doing is I start a job, I come out with my, call it 200% ability, which is other people's maybe 100%. And I've had to pull back. I've had to tell myself actively, Do not give all of yourself right now. Give 60%. And I think one of the things us neurodivergent people struggle with is we want to be recognized because we are good at what we do and what we know. And for some of us, myself, I've made a job out of my special interest. So I'm good at it. So I have very low support needs in this area. But when I am working with other folks who struggle to keep up, maybe I have this weird, like, am I the high performer or are they the high performer? So what I've really needed to do was just focus on myself, do what I need to do. I can create a playbook or a guidebook in a day, but somebody else, it might take a couple of weeks. So I will create it. I'll let it sit. I'll lose interest in it. And then I'll come back to it and then produce it. Because for me, if I'm consistently high performing, I'm going to burn out faster. Whereas somebody
Right.
else is not going to burn out fast, potentially. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Kate, because I did go off on a
No,
little bit of a tangent. Okay.
you did. No, and you didn't go on a tangent. That's exactly it. And you hit the
Okay.
nail on the head, this super productivity. And I see it, on your, you may not realize that other people can see it. Well, maybe other people can't, but I definitely see it. I see that. And I think I recognize it. I think, yeah, I can see, Victoria's brain, just go, oh, yeah, I've got this idea. And oh, yeah, I've got that idea. And just pumping it out. And it's fantastic. But in a
Yes.
typical traditional working environment, so often performance management isn't based on output, that kind of output.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's based on personal preferences, personal likes and dislikes, whether or not your personality fits in with the crowd.
Yep.
And that's just, yeah, so unfair. But the
So unfair.
manager, it's the manager's job, it's the manager's responsibility, I would say, even to adopt a mindset that thinks of high performance in a different way.
Yes. Kate, can I tell you a story about that?
Yeah,
I think this might resonate with folks watching because I posted about it a couple of days ago, but it's really been on my mind. I had a supervisor several, like 10 years ago, say, you get to the answer so fast. Other people are frustrated because they can't com- compete is the wrong word, but they can't catch up to you. Why
yeah,
is that my fault? Why
right.
is that my job to now essentially shrink, dim, change, stuff my face so I don't say it? Why do I have to be the one to be frustrated at other people's inability to get to an answer quickly? And so, something for me that I recognized specifically when the shutdown happened in 2020 was that being in a work environment, being in a physical office environment is not good for me. If I go in once or twice, 3 times a month, 4 times a month, that is a much better situation than working in a team like every single day because I was getting frustrated, annoyed. My disposition was, I was always dysregulated. And I'm sure this resonates for some folks. Like, I was the one getting in trouble, but I was the one doing the work, but everybody else was doing it the same way. But because I stuck out like the rainbow sheep of the group, I was the one getting scapegoated and targeted. So for me, I've really had to be intentional about what types of working environments am I going after because I don't want to be that dysregulated, rude jerk who is just constantly being told you're not good enough when I know that is not the case. I'm just not, you're good enough. You're not my people.
Exactly. Exactly. You're even better than good enough. You're
Thanks.
excelling, but you're excelling in a different way. And I talk about this a lot with clients, this idea of the A game, as it's a very male, very masculine terminology, driven by a neurotypical view of what work should be, the A game, always being on it and being in the office for 10 hours and having your dinner in the office and staying overnight and sleeping on the floor. I know that's a bit outdated now, but when I was growing up, that was very much the case. In the
Yeah.
90s, you stayed in work. I often stayed in work until 11 o'clock at night as a
Wow.
young female. and traveled home on a night bus at midnight in order to get home. I did that on numerous occasions, and I had
Wow.
nothing to do, till 11 o'clock at night, nothing to do. But I felt complete pressure to not go because everyone else was doing it. And this is the problem with the working environment. This is why I say that the high performance that neurotypical people will display will not necessarily meet the expectations of a non-neurodivergent style of high performance. And this some of the
Absolutely.
things that we can do to mitigate that, around the mindset. I think you've alluded to some to them already. We can go. We've got 15
Yeah.
minutes, believe it or not, left of our session. And those of you who are on, please, take the opportunity to ask questions if anything, resonated with you, or you want to pick Dr. Victoria's brain. She has so much knowledge. Please feel free to do so. But this whole idea of once a year, why does it have to be once a year? Why can't it be? I mean, it may well be the process that it's once a year, but
Mm,
you don't have to only reserve your conversation to
right.
once a year, do you? You can have, multiple transparent and honest discussions and feedback sessions.
And I think you should. I mean, the traditional way is once a year because it used to coincide with raises, bonuses, promotions. For me, I've worked in 3 corporate situations now, and it's 3 to 4 times a year. So, like the once a year evaluation at the end of the fiscal year, uh, calendar year, not fiscal year. There's so many years, academic, fiscal,
Yeah.
it's all ridiculous. So one,
Yes.
culmination, the first, which is like, let's set your goals. And then the second and third being like check-ins. But what I
Yeah.
think people don't realize is you need to be checking in with people every single week or 2 weeks in order to even get to that final stage. Because if you're
Exactly.
holding on to feedback for a year, you're never going to see growth or development because someone's not going to know how to grow
Exactly.
or stretch. And the other piece that I see missing for folks, especially when we're thinking about neurodivergent people, is like, what are the standards that someone needs to meet in order to be the next level? If you don't clearly know, even if it's not a clear path or it's, stepping stones or what have you, you should know what you need to be doing to get to that next level. Not necessarily doing that next level to be the next level, but like, what are the things I need to upskill on in order to become a project manager or a supervisor? Because if you're not, what are people working for? Like, what are we doing?
What
And
are we
I,
doing?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I was just saying, yeah, I was agreeing
Okay,
100% with everything you were saying.
I
Please
got
feel
it.
free to keep talking. I would never stop someone
I just get
mid-flow.
so excited. Like,
No, that's good. I love it.
thanks. Um,
Love it.
it's just not worth it. And you said this earlier, the rating system, right? Like folks use like 1 to 5 or
Yeah.
whatever those systems are. For us neurodivergent folks, we're going to want a 5. But I've worked at a place where they straight out said no one gets above a 4. Then why do you
Right.
have a 5?
Why the hell?
Why is a 5 on there? Because then you're making me stressed out.
Crazy. Yeah.
Like, what are we doing?
I've never understood that whole, they call it, I don't know if you call it the same, but we call it calibration in the
Yes.
UK, where
Mhm.
you may actually come out as a 5, but there's no way they're going to give you a 5 because A, they don't have the budget to give you the bonus that's at the level of a 5 performer. And the leadership team need to minimize the amount of people getting that rating in order to create this environment of competition. So it's all very bizarre, and totally weighted against neurodivergent people. And
Absolutely.
the thing you just said just now about continuous feedback is so important for neurodivergent people, autistic people in particular, because so many neurodivergent people think literally. If you're not telling people what they need to know, they're not going to know. They're not going to be able to sit there and decode it. It's hard enough when you're not neurodivergent to sit there and think, I wonder what this manager really thinks of my performance. They're not telling me, but they gave me a funny look that day when I did something this way. So maybe they didn't like it. So maybe I need to do it in. no, 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 no. We can't be dealing with that. You've got to tell people the reality of the situation, even if it's, maybe slightly contentious. You may feel, reticent because you may be worried that you're going to upset someone. But it's all about that ability to be able to deal with conflict or possible conflict and give negative feedback in a way that isn't harsh, and
Right.
someone can do something with it, constructive, as they call it.
And if someone is feeling defensive, owning that. So I said earlier, I had one supervisor once say, "Are you in a place to hear this feedback right now? Do you have capacity?" And it was that small question that made me realize we're not seeking consent enough to give feedback. I worked with a client a while ago and they got feedback about something. They started crying because it was a visceral reaction. The person just kept pressing on and giving the feedback while this person is crying. No, no, no. That is not how you do this. You say, "Are you okay? Let's take a few minutes. Let's jump off the call. You take time. Ping me when you're ready." The lack of now I think you've probably seen this on my page. The lack of relational intelligence that people have is something that we really need to dig into because emotional intelligence is your self awareness.
Yeah.
The relational intelligence is something that we really need to work on for people because, like, how can you sit there watching me cry, just giving me feedback? I'm not hearing it, I'm not learning anything from it. That's just cruel, like inhumane almost. And I laugh because it's so common and I don't know where it comes from. I think it does go back to what you said around the traditional like male energy, masculine energy of the working world. I think it comes from that, but we have to do better because Gen Z and Alpha Gen are going to challenge us in a way that they're not going to stay. If something is happening that is being viewed as unfair or inequitable, or supervisors don't have emotional intelligence or relational intelligence, they're not going to stay in these jobs.
Yeah.
So if we don't get better, more than half of those generations are going to come into our workplaces either diagnosed or having an understanding of what neurodivergence is and recognize their own support needs. So now is the time because we have to get better at this stuff for them if we want our workplaces to thrive. Like we just can't keep doing what we've always done. It's not
Well
good.
said.
Oh, thanks.
Well said. And what a great point, that can you imagine, you got all these empowered individuals, who know who they are, who
Mm,
understand who they are, who know their neurotype, who believe in their neurotype, and, coming into a working environment where people have traditionally hidden their
mhm,
difference, not being aware of their difference, with managers who don't know how to accept or understand the difference or mitigate, the challenges faced by those differences and create a cohesive team, which is,
mm.
truly neuro inclusive. Coming into that environment it's a clash. It's bound to.
Yes.
We're starting to see it already. I don't know if you've come across the story. I know you're in the US, but in the UK we have this TV personality called Greg Wallace, very
Oh,
famous.
I am
Have you heard of
very in that.
have you heard of it? Yeah, I mean it's mad because on
Wild.
the one hand, don't get me wrong, I am not justifying anything that he did, but he's a man who's what, 60 odd. He's,
Hmm.
recently found out he's autistic,
Yep.
doesn't feel comfortable wearing underwear. That's fine, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable. They find it restrictive or it's
Yep.
uncomfortable or it's scratchy. But why do you have to pull your trousers down and expose yourself to your colleague? That's just poor behavior and poor judgment. But it has to be seen in the context of the environment that he's been raised in and the
Yes.
era that he comes from. He's from a totally different. You can't compare him to
Mm.
someone who's like 21, was diagnosed when they were 4, understands their neurodivergence, has been brought up in a way that helps them to navigate the world through the lens of neurodivergence. It's a completely different affair. And those worlds meeting is quite something. We're
Yes.
going to have to prepare for it. And I don't think organizations are thinking in that way yet. they're thinking still, judging by the conversations I'm having to this
Yeah.
day, that it's a nice to have. Oh, yeah, we can do that later. We don't need to worry about that. We've got other fish to fry.
Mm,
Oh no, we're not doing that yet. We're doing the female, we're doing the gender thing.
right. Right.
Yeah,
I will say more and more folks, at least folks that I'm working with, organizations I'm working with, and I am lucky. I don't really know how to call it. I convene for an organization here in the US, a cohort of neurodivergent women leaders. So they are folks who are in leadership positions like manager and up who are neurodivergent. And I will say we are seeing, yes, we're still talking about gender, we're still talking about race, we're still talking about sexuality. And we need to be including this conversation of neurodivergence in that because the intersections between these
right.
are impacting how people come out. And to your point around context and generation, in every workshop, in every conversation I have, I talk about our conditioning, our socialization, the time and place we were born matter to how we interact and view the world, but also how they view and interact with us. It's not just us, it's the perception, it's the observing of us. So to your point, I a couple of years ago was giving a talk in a I think she was turning 60. She came up to me and said, I am getting my autism diagnosis next week on my
Right.
birthday, and I am so excited. I always thought I was the problem. And how
Yeah,
often do we hear that? And we have to do better. It's not a nice to have. Every single team is neurodiverse. There is at least one person on that team, disclosed, aware, unaware,
yeah.
diagnosed, that has some difference in terms of under that neurodivergent umbrella that we have to be thinking about proactively. If we're not, again, we are not going to retain top talent. People will leave, or they're calling Gen Z like early retirement. They
Yeah,
just want to have better work boundaries. Like, I don't understand why we have to label that. We should have boundaries at work. But it's,
yeah.
to your point, not a nice to have. It needs to be now, and it needs to be an overhaul of some major systems for folks.
I love the fact that you're doing that group for the women, and don't get me wrong at all. I know you don't get me wrong, but for the audience, I don't absolutely value, the work that's been done on gender, the work that's been done on race. It's all really important stuff, but it
Yeah.
shouldn't be one or that or t'other, as we say in the UK, some parts of the UK. It shouldn't be
Yep.
one or the other. It can be, why can't it be both? Why can't it be,
Absolutely.
that intersectional view? We've just got a couple of
Absolutely.
minutes left, and I thought, I'd give the opportunity to you, Victoria, to talk about a couple of things that you would put forward as being pivotal in
Mhm.
doing performance management through a neuro-inclusive lens. That's the first thing. And secondly, to tell people about what you're up to and how they can find out more.
Yeah. All right. Let's start with the find out more and how you can get in touch. You can obviously join me on LinkedIn. You can view my website, send me an email. I've had a bunch of different folks send messages, recognize that my messages have increased a lot. And being autistic ADHD, it gets a little overwhelming. So please forgive me if I don't get back to you immediately. I have quite a few different like digital products out in the world right now. I also do training. I do workshops. I create things. I do things virtually. I do things in person. I love to create content for organizations. Like I wrote a best practice guide for the New York Times. Like these are things that I love to do. And because I have it all here, it's quick. I'll leave it at that. The things that I think are really key takeaways for folks are how are we thinking about employee experience? How are we including neurodiversity, neuro inclusion, neuro affirmations in the work that we're presently doing? The other thing I want folks to think about, if you are neurodivergent or if you're supervising anyone ever or interacting with anyone, if something you've said or done doesn't land the first time, give yourself permission to try a different approach. And I say that because I think folks feel like being neuro-inclusive is just an add-on or something that is hard to do. There's really light lifts. I mean, it's really not an overhaul of everything. You don't have to run to your HR and say, we have to completely abolish everything and start over. You don't need to do
Mhm.
that. You can change the way you ask questions. You can say, rather than any questions, you could simply say, what questions do you have? If you don't have any now, send me an email. If you're virtually running a meeting, give folks time to process. Don't ask a question and then wait 2 seconds. Wait 10 to 15 seconds. Give folks permission to type in the chat. Give folks permission to not be on camera. Give folks permission to use focus toys. Like, it feels intuitive, but I know that people don't think about those things every day. And when you bring it up, they're like, oh, that's so simple. Why didn't I think of that? Because you haven't needed to. So why don't we
Exactly.
start thinking about it? There's lots of books. There's a virtual chat next week, actually. It's on my page. It's with Dr. Nancy Doyle. She wrote a book called Learning from Neurodivergent Leaders, and she's going to be doing a chat with the 92nd Street Y, and Spark Your Health is part of that, and so is the Belfer Center, the group that I'm running. And she's going to be talking about masking. She's going to be talking about what are things we can learn from neurodivergent leaders. If you are a leader currently, you have neurodivergent people. So start just doing the learning process. Come to that talk, pick up a book, follow Kate, follow me. Just start somewhere. It doesn't need to be a huge, massive undertaking. It can be very simple and taken in small chunks. In my opinion.
Yeah, preach that, Victoria. I mean, this is the thing, it doesn't need to be people think, oh God, it's too much. It's going to cost me loads of money. It's going to cost me loads of time, going to
Nope.
cost me loads of resources. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be very small interventions. Like, Dr. Victoria has said, having constant conversations, regular feedback, which is led by positives, don't lead with negatives, lead with recognition, and positives, what successes have happened, what have they done well. It's really important for neurodivergent people. And what you just said just now about asynchronous communication is so key. Don't force everyone to do things in the same way, because it doesn't work. Having their cameras on, yes, I know it's nice to see people's faces, but if someone doesn't feel comfortable, it's causing them pain even to have their camera on. Let them have it off, let them use the chat, let them use email, and give them permission to answer later on. So I know my son, when I talk to him, I ask him a question, but he may not answer me until 3 or 4 hours later. And it will just come out of the blue because he's taking that time to reflect and process. So it's so important to have that permission, to communicate in different ways. It's been amazing, so amazing talking to you. You can find me on LinkedIn, just like Victoria. You can reach out to me at my email, which is kateasiche@wheretolookcoms.co.uk. You can visit my website, which is wheretolookcoms.co.uk. I have a training course. I have one-to-one coaching for managers. I do very similar work actually to Dr. Victoria, and this is why we have so much aligned thinking. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Dr. Victoria. I hope we can do it again one day soon.
Yes.
Really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. And I hope those of you who've joined have found it valuable.
Thanks all. Thank you, Kate. I do hope we do it again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.
Bye, everyone.